All right, so welcome to System Login Access Manager training. Thank you for being here today. I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of come to this and work through some of the key elements to the duties for this particular role. I know that I've gotten requests for it from a few people. So this is the first training session that I've created front to back since I started as the training specialist. So I'm excited about it, and I appreciate everybody being here. We're just going to go through a few different aspects of this role, and I do encourage you to stop me and ask questions at any point. If if you need me to dig a little deeper on anything, speak up, let me know. If something's not making sense, we can definitely take a closer look at it. This is being recorded, so once it has processed and everything, I'll post it on YouTube, and I'll put the link to that video in the SLAM channel on Basecamp. That way, if you need to go back and double check anything, or if you know somebody who wanted to be here and wasn't able to, they'll be able to go back and watch that recording. And we're hoping to do this periodically. So if there's anybody who wasn't able to be here this time but can come next time, this won't be the last time that we do this. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So what is a SLAM? I would hope that if you're here, you kind of already know that. This text is really just straight from our knowledge book. I'm not going to read it word for word, but it pretty much boils down to the person who's designated to be the point person in a library to create and maintain login access accounts. And those are basically the accounts that staff get in order to log into Evergreen. So the SLAMs are basically in charge of creating those accounts and then doing a little bit of periodic maintenance and then deactivating them if an employee leaves. So we're going to kind of go through each different step of that process today. We're going to be talking about creating staff login accounts. So we'll look at the process for making those from scratch. We're going to talk about maintenance and what is your responsibility versus the stuff that NC Cardinal does. And also then we'll be talking about the password policies and I know that's a new policy for all of us. So we'll be looking a little bit about what that means for SLAMs and what your role is related to passwords. We'll also be talking a little bit about what you can expect to hear from me in terms of quarterly communications that I'll be sending out to everyone. And then we'll also look at the process of deactivating accounts and the different elements that are sort of part of that. So before we dig into those, let's look at what we're really covering today is the life cycle of an Evergreen staff login account. So it starts at creation, obviously, and that's a SLAM responsibility. Account creation is designated to each of the SLAMs at each library. NC Cardinal will assign permissions for catalogers and system admins, but it's still, so that should be, let's see, it looks like we've got somebody with some background noise.
Okay. All right. All right.
You should be able to right click and mute them. If you make me a co-host, I'm happy to do that.
All right, I think I found where it was coming from, but I will also make you a co-host just in case. All right, so account creation is a SLAM responsibility. Even if we're talking about an account like a cataloger where NC Cardinal is going to be assigning the permissions, it's still the responsibility of the SLAM at that library to create the base account that will then have the permissions updated. The next step in the life cycle is management. Accounts expire. That's going to be the biggest thing where you come in. Every 3 years, for most of you, those staff accounts are going to expire and they'll need to be renewed. It's not a hard thing to do, and it's generally something that can be caught fairly quickly, but that'll be something that you need to make sure that you do. Unfortunately, cataloger accounts do have to come through NC Cardinal, so that's where those quarterly communications will come in. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. And then, of course, occasionally you're going to have staff whose permission levels change, who go from a cataloger, or I'm sorry, a circulator to circulation lead. And in those cases, that's going to fall to the SLAMs to make sure that they're at the appropriate permission level for their job. Occasionally, you'll need to reach out to Cardinal to kind of make those permission changes depending on what they are. And then deactivation is the end, or it can be the end. Basically, deactivation is an important step in ensuring that Evergreen and Cardinal stay secure. So we want to make sure that as staff leave, their accounts are deactivated so they can't get back into them for whatever reason. Deactivation, though, can be reactivated. So theoretically, a staff member could leave and then come back and have their account reactivated and kind of dip back into this cycle. So let's start at the beginning. We're going to look at creating accounts. And just a couple of points to note when you're creating accounts. There is a difference between a generic account, like a Circ staff account that everyone on the circulation desk logs into the same one of, a staff login, which is specific to an individual staff member, and then a circulation account for a staff member. And I know that that's confusing because the permission level for those circulation accounts is staff. But they're basically, the staff login is where they're going to be doing their work in Evergreen versus the circulation account, which allows them to circulate items through the library just as any other patron would, but following whatever library policies are set up for staff. So we'll look at the difference between that when we actually go in to create one of these. There are some standards that we request you use for personal information. In general, some of those standards are standard across the board for everyone. Others are something that can kind of be developed on a library by library basis, such as the middle name. You as your library can decide what the middle name looks like, but we do ask that you have a standard middle name that you assign to every staff member in their login accounts. We'll look a little bit at permissions. Permission levels are one of the trickier aspects of creating accounts. And then this is the thing that gets me pretty much every time I create an account, setting working locations. So we'll look at what that means and how to set working locations and why it's so important too. So the difference between the different types of accounts. A generic account really should only be for circulators. I know some libraries have them for circulator leads, that's okay as well. But really, this is not for places where there's going to be acquisition or cataloging or library settings done. You want to make sure that any of those types of activities can be traced back to a specific account in case there's ever a problem. So for generic accounts like Circ staff, that's totally fine in those kind of frontline accounts where it's just going to be checking items in and out and that type of thing. But once you get into actually being able to change records or library settings, that's when we really need to move into those individual staff accounts. You can set those for circulators, obviously, but also, you know, if your library has pages or volunteers that work, then you can have those generic accounts for them as well. Staff login accounts, which is really what SLAMs are in charge of. The key thing is that people really should not be using these accounts to circulate items. And that includes, you know, circulating items for use in the library. Say, for example, checking out a bunch of things to use for story times. What we would recommend that you do is create a generic patron level staff account that you can check out those items for, just to kind of keep these staff login accounts as clear as possible without having to worry about things going lost on them or anything like that. It's mostly important that catalogers and admins have these accounts, but a lot of libraries also give individual accounts to circulators, and that's great. We encourage that. There's no reason not to do that unless it just is too much work on the SLAM or anything like that. It's totally fine to do a generic staff account for circulators, but you can also do individual staff login accounts for circulators. And now staff circulation accounts, these are essentially accounts that function as patron accounts, but have a designation on them of staff so that staff maybe avoid late fees if your library does not charge late fees for staff. And those are completely separate from their staff login accounts. Those are accounts that if they stop working at the library but continue to be a patron of the library, can be changed to regular adult circulation accounts, whereas the staff login accounts cannot. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm still teasing apart some of the nuances on these. All right, so When you're creating these accounts, staff login accounts, there are a few different standards that you need to make sure you include. And we'll look at these in detail when we're actually creating one. The first is that we do ask that you create a standard middle name that all of the staff at your library uses. So a lot of times this is just staff, or it might be the name of your library, might be, you know, the name of your library plus staff. It doesn't really matter what it is as long as it's standard. And one of the reasons for that is because it makes it really easy if you're looking somebody up to differentiate between a patron type staff account and a staff login account. It's also a good way to kind of help us find things quickly if, you know, if we're trying to find all of your staff or anything like that. One thing that we do ask you to standardize across the entire consortium is the date of birth. And we ask that you set that as January 1st, 1900. Obviously, this is a birthday that we are not going to see from any of our patrons. So it's just another way to differentiate these accounts from any potential patron account and to do any kind of quick lookups or anything like that. Because of the password policy, we have asked that every staff login account have an email address associated with it. That really should be the email address for the person the account belongs to. For generic staff accounts, like circulation accounts, that can be either the SLAM's email address if they'll be in charge of updating the password, or the email address of the sort of the supervisor for that department, the main point person that would be dealing with that account. So it doesn't necessarily matter whose email address that is, as long as it's going to somebody who can update the password when the time comes. The phone number is not necessary to include, but if you choose not to include it, there is, it's one of the default settings for most of you. So if you choose not to include a phone number, you do have to sort of uncheck a box, and I'll show you that when we go into create an account. And then for the address, make sure you're using your library's address, not the staff member's home address. Any questions about any of that? All right. So let's look briefly at permission groups. And this is a little bit of a confusing graphic because permission groups are a little bit confusing. So overall, Evergreen staff falls into sort of two different categories. There's circulator categories and there's cataloger categories. Circulator is the lowest permission level available. And so any account that you create must have at least a circulator level for staff. From there, you can increase that permission level to circulation lead, to branch admin, and eventually to system admin. And so these are all sort of like build off of each other. On a completely separate branch is the cataloger permissions. And these permissions do need to be set by NC Cardinal. Catalogers will have to take the assessments before they can receive these permission levels. But it's important for you to kind of understand how they work in conjunction with the others. So the first one that is available is item cataloger. If somebody needs bib cataloger permissions, they do have to take a second assessment for that. And then the item cataloger can be changed to bib cataloger. Where this kind of comes into play is that somebody may need two different types of permissions. Say a branch supervisor may also be a bibliographic cataloger. So in that case, you would go ahead and set them to that branch admin status. And then once they've taken their assessments, I'll go in and I'll make them a bibliographic cataloger, but I will maintain branch admin as their secondary permission level. So they'll basically have two different permission profiles attached to the same account. And one is for branch admin and one is for bibliographic cataloger. Are there any questions about that? I know it's kind of confusing.
Can I add something
Absolutely.
briefly? The item cataloger actually has all of the permissions that the circulator does. So basically they have all those kind of basic checkout functions and that sort of thing. But they don't have, for instance, circ lead, branch admin, system admin by default, unless we add that as a secondary permission group.
Maybe it would make more sense if I had the branching coming off of circulator. I'll keep that in mind for future versions.
This is Lisa. The biggest thing, because I'm an item cataloger, and the main reason I asked to do that, and I took the test, is so I can delete items. for weeding, and I don't have to send them to our technical services folks. So that's the main advantage of that item cataloger, is they can delete items.
Yeah, there are definitely some different permissions that are available at that item cataloger level that are useful for circulators. So depending on what your library policy is, there's no reason not to allow non-technical services staff to get these permissions. They just have to pass the assessment.
Well, and I supervise the technical services.
Oh,
so.
well then, yeah, you should definitely have those.
But I don't want to have anything to do with editing records, really. I just need to be able to add a copy if need be, or delete copies if need be. So.
Yeah, so there are a variety of different sort of job functions that may require a different sort of combination of these permission levels. One thing to note as SLAMs, and that's that these in green must be set by NC Cardinal. SLAMs should be able to set the others. Am I right about that, Benjamin? Branch admin can be set by a SLAM, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, all right. I just suddenly had this moment of thinking, did I get that right? So yes, the ones in green, system admin, item cataloger, and bibliographic cataloger do need to go through NC Cardinal to be set. The rest of those SLAMs can do as needed.
And I don't know, I may have missed this, but if you have somebody who you know is just going to be an item cataloger or a bib cataloger, you can set them up initially as a circulator, and then we'll bump them up if you tell us.
Yes. So basically, when you create that account, just put it in as a circulator. Then once they have passed their assessments, we'll make them a cataloger. So you don't have to worry about that. The only thing you'd have to worry about is if they come to you and they say, I took my assessment 3 weeks ago and I still can't catalog anything. And then, you might want to reach out to me and see what's going on with that. All right, so let's go ahead and make an account. Let's see this kind of live. So you're going to make your accounts. This is supposed to be in dev. You're going to be making your accounts for staff the same way that you would for patrons. The only difference is in the settings that you add to it. So one of the key things is that staff login accounts are going to have a username rather than barcode. So let's give this person T staff as their barcode and username, and those are going to match. And then you can just use a generic password to begin with, and they can update their password through the OPAC to whatever more secure option they'd like. For the name, so the fields highlighted in yellow obviously are the required fields. For the name, I'm going to put in a first name and a last name, and these are going to be their actual first and last name. But for the middle name, I'm going to put in the standard that the library that I'm theoretically within has chosen. So in this case, we're just going to call it library staff. And so that's going to be the middle name for every single staff member. I'm going to come down here to date of birth, and I'm going to set that as January 1st, 1900. And then for the email address, we do have to make sure that an email address is associated with this account, since this is a personal staff login account and not a generic one. I do want to make sure it is the email address for this actual staff member. So tstaff@library.gov. And I'm going to skip all the phone numbers. And then I would set the correct home library. And just go with that. And then let's say this is a cataloger. So for this person, I'm going to go ahead and give them circulator permissions for now, and then later NC Cardinal will go in and change that to cataloger. If this was a, say, circulation lead, then when I go in to set the cataloger permissions, I would click on secondary groups, and that's where I would add circulation lead here, and then make this item cataloger. You don't really need to know about that because that's not something you're going to be doing, but it's just something to be aware of. If somebody is concerned that they go in and they see they're just an item cataloger now, they do have a secondary group that's going to show them as, whatever administrative status they need. But you're generally going to put somebody as a circulator or circ lead or branch admin when you're creating these accounts. Now, the privilege expiration date, I'm not going to do anything with right now. But just be aware that when 2025 rolls around, you are going to have to come in and click this update expire date, and that's going to just automatically give them another 3 years. If your library has those settings differently, that accounts expire on a different rotation than that, that's going to come up automatically, I believe. And make sure that this box for active is clicked. Then I did say earlier that if you don't want to include a phone number, you do have to make it not a required thing. That's going to be down here on the user settings section. You see that even though I had a bunch of phone number information up at the top, it's asking for the phone number again. I'm going to click that box. Basically, that's the phone number that that holds and notifications would go to. So I just need to make sure that I've unclicked that since I haven't included a phone number. And then for the mailing address, I'm going to make that my library's address. So and that should do it. And at this point, I can go ahead and save this account, but I'm not done. And this is the part that I tend to forget. So I'm going to really harp on it so nobody else forgets, because it can cause a lot of problems. So now I'm going to go back into that patrons account. So we're going to come up here to search for patrons, and I'm going to look for T staff. And they've come up and we see their date of birth is 1900. So we know that they're definitely a staff member, not a real patron, even though they've got the circulator permissions. That's just sort of another way to double check it. I'm going to go into their account, and now I'm going to come up here to the other menu. And I am going to come down here to the user permission editor, and I'm going to set their working locations. Now, if I fail to do this, they're not going to be able to do anything. They're not going to be able to actually log in and work within Evergreen. So it's really important that we set these working locations. Most libraries, I think, as a standard, just set every location within their system. Some libraries may just do one branch, but I think we generally recommend that everybody does every branch within a system. That way, if a staff member ends up going and doing some work at a different location or needs to just essentially log into a workstation at a different location, they're able to. So I know that there's more than that, but I'm not going to look through them right now. I'm going to click every location that I would like to have this account be able to work in. And then I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom, and I'm going to click save. So this save is not the same as the save button in the edit section where you put in their information. This save has to be done separately in order for these working locations to actually be assigned to the account. So I'll save this, and now this user would be able to log in to Evergreen and do whatever work they need to do. Are there any questions about the creation process? All right, well, let's keep going then. So after you create accounts, there is a little bit of maintenance involved. It's really not very much, but you are sort of, essentially, you're the main point person for necessary maintenance. A couple of key points to be aware of. One of the main things that you'll probably get questions about is passwords. You, for the most part, aren't really going to be the one who's updating those passwords. Maybe for generic staff accounts for, the circulation department or something like that, you may, but for those individual unique staff logins, you may verify accounts for people occasionally just to make sure that what they think they're typing in as their password is actually what Evergreen knows as their password. And you may occasionally get notifications from me saying these staff members have not updated their password. It's been over 90 days. Can you please remind them? However, for the most part, we're not really going to be asking you to be updating passwords. I know some libraries kind of have put into place a policy saying, after another month past the 90 days, they'll just put in something generic so that the staff can't log in, and that'll kind of force their hand. And occasionally you may find that you want to set a temporary password for somebody just to be able to quickly get them into their account if they've forgotten their password, but they still will need to go in through the OPAC, and we'll look at how to do that they'll need to go in through the OPAC to reset their passwords themselves. And that is for security reasons. They really need to be in charge of their own passwords. Additionally, one of the big things that you may run into are expiration dates. For circulators, circ leads, and branch admins, you can extend those expiration dates yourself. For catalogers and system admins, that does have to come through NC Cardinal, and that's another one of those quarterly notifications that you'll receive from me, just with basically a list of those accounts that need to be extended. And then occasionally you'll also have changes to permission levels. Circulator who gets a promotion and becomes circ lead or something like that, you'll need to make sure that you go in and update their permission levels. In terms of password maintenance, some things just to keep in mind that SLAMs can and should do, and some things that really are for NC Cardinal to take care of. SLAMs can update passwords on generic accounts, so circ staff accounts. They can show staff how to update passwords. This is one thing that we've discovered a lot of people get very confused by. It's not a difficult process, but there are a lot of steps to it, and there are a lot of different areas a mistake could be made very easily. So sometimes it just helps to have somebody there showing you in person instead of going back and forth via email or a ticket with steps. If you want to show people how to update their passwords, that would be great. Additionally, you may occasionally verify passwords. If somebody says, I know my password, but it's not working, potentially you could verify it for them and see that it's actually working the way that it's actually the password that they think it is. That would be something that is similar to what you would do for a patron if they come in and are saying that their PIN number is not working. You have that ability to do that. And then you can also set temporary passwords for circulators and I guess circ leads, but for catalogers and system admins, the only people that can set those temporary passwords are NC Cardinal team. So you would need to send that to us. Overall, I think we prefer that sort of password resets go through us. Benjamin, is that where do we stand on that?
For which type of account, sorry?
So like if a circulator needed their password reset, would we prefer them to come through us, or can a SLAM just go ahead and take care of that and give them a temporary password?
No, that's fine. Any accounts that they have the ability to administrate and help with their folks. It's just really if it's item cataloger, sysadmin can't remember theirs, then we can handle that. But yeah, it actually would be great if they would do that. That would,
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I was giving the right information here. So yes, you can set temporary passwords for basically anybody that you have the ability to edit their account for. So not catalogers or system admins, but circulators and leads. However, on the other side of that, we really ask that SLAMs do not maintain a list of staff passwords. The point of the password policy is to make Evergreen more secure. And if you've got a spreadsheet sitting out there with everybody's password in it, that's not terribly secure. So we'd prefer you didn't do that. And then we will not be able to set temporary passwords for those catalogers and admins. So that would have to come through us. In terms of setting permissions, so we already sort of went over this, but just a couple details about it. Cataloger permissions come in 2 levels, and that's item and bib. You do have to receive the item cataloger level before you can receive the bib cataloger, so you do have to pass that assessment before you can take the bib assessment. There are assessments available. Those were actually very recently updated, as in I posted them yesterday. And basically those are open book. You can take them as many times as you need to pass them. And generally speaking, I will get back to somebody within a week after having passed it with their updated permission levels. If somebody needs it sooner, don't hesitate to reach out to me and say, this person just passed their assessment. They need their cataloger permission today. I'm happy to change that midweek, but I definitely will make sure that it never goes more than a week without checking in. Once somebody has cataloger permissions, you will not be able to do any general maintenance on their account. You won't be able to update their expiration dates. You won't be able to, change their last name if that changes. You won't be able to change their email address. If, your library system changes their domain name, you won't be able to go in and fix those people's email addresses. So any account maintenance that has to happen on those cataloger accounts after they've received the cataloger permissions will have to come through Cardinal. So where does that leave us in terms of your communication with me? You're absolutely always welcome to reach out to me. You can submit a ticket with any version of questions about your SLAM duties, whether it's I forget how to create an account, or can you please do this to a circular or to a cataloger's account. You're always welcome to reach out to me, but on a quarterly basis, I will be reaching out to you. And basically, you will hear from me every 3 months or so with a list of staff members that are set to expire over the course of the next 3 months. So this is, I'll include everybody, circulators, catalogers, system admins, everybody. You should go in and update those that you have access to using that just update expire date, that button that I showed you. If it's a cataloger or a sysadmin, I will have to do that. But basically, I want to hear from you that this person is still employed at the library. So if I send you a list of 5 catalogers and only 2 of them still work there, then basically I want you to let me know these people should be updated, these people should be deactivated. If I send you a list of a bunch of circulators and some of them have left, you can deactivate those yourself. But while I'm going in and deactivating, I can do that for you as well. But generally speaking, that's definitely great if you can take care of that, just because I am reaching out to every SLAM every 3 months and getting back long lists of people. So any bit that you can take care of helps me out a lot. You will also hear from me with a list of staff members whose passwords are out of date. And that's basically the same thing. If it is, if it's a cataloger or something like that, and they need a new temporary password, I can set that. If it's a circulator or a branch admin and they need a new password, you can set that. Otherwise, if it's just somebody has forgotten to reset their password, basically what we're asking you to do with this list is to reach out to them and remind them. And the main reason for that is so that I am not emailing thousands of people every 3 months saying, you've gotten all these automatic notifications, but now this is a real person that's asking you to update your password. It's just a lot easier for me to email the SLAMs, and then the SLAMs can reach out to those staff members that don't have it. I know we've got a couple of library systems that after a certain amount of time want to just sort of set a generic password on those accounts and kind of force the hands of those people. That's totally fine. This list can help you know who to do that and when. Basically, when you get that list, you'll need to update the expiration dates for circulators and leads and branch admins as well. Then send me a list of catalogers and system admins to update, deactivate the accounts for former circulators and leads, and request deactivation for former catalogers or admins. And then, of course, send those reminders to staff to update passwords. Any questions about what those communications will be like? All right, so that brings us to that kind of final piece of the life cycle, and that's deactivation. And we're going to talk about a couple of different aspects of the deactivation process. We'll talk about what the difference between deactivation and deletion is. We will talk about how to actually deactivate, because when it's a circulator or a lead or a branch admin, SLAMs will be in charge of that deactivation process. If it's a cataloger or a system admin, then that'll come through NC Cardinal, but we'll communicate about it. And then, of course, we'll talk about the different aspects of the process that you need to keep in mind. And one of the big ones that I want to stress is changing the permission level down to circulator. So if you're deactivating a branch admin, you do want to make sure that you set them down to circulator during that deactivation process. And then one final piece that is connected, even if it's not necessarily directly a part of the account, and that's if the person leaving has reports that the library needs, then we'll go through the process of how to get those reports ready for the library to continue to get them, even though this account is being deactivated. Because once the account's deactivated, you will cease to receive those reports. So the difference between deactivation and deletion, deactivation can still be found through a patron search if you click the Include Inactive button. And then those can also be reactivated just right there at Evergreen. It's a pretty easy process. So if you have somebody who leaves and then comes back, quits, and then 2 years later gets rehired, you can reactivate their account as long as it hasn't been deleted. Deletion, those accounts, we can find them through a query, the Cardinal team can, but I don't believe they'll come up in Evergreen. If you search for something very, very specific, I think they might sometimes, but for the most part, just assume once it's deleted, it's not coming up in Evergreen. And once they're deleted, they really can't be reactivated. We can have Mobius undelete somebody, but it's not something that we generally do unless there's like very extenuating circumstances. So once it's deleted, it can't be reactivated. Just to keep in mind the difference between those two. In terms of deactivation, we'll go through this process together, but basically the steps are to change the password so that the staff member can't come back in and log in, set the expiration date to the day that you are deleting, change the permission group to circulator if necessary, and click the deactivation button. So let's go ahead and do that. And we are going to just deactivate this account that we've already created. So we're going to come back over here to the edit screen for this test staff. And I'm going to scroll down to sort of this section. And they're already a circulator, so that's easy, but I do believe I set a secondary group. I did. So I'm going to delete this circulation lead. That's rarely going to be an issue for you because if they have to, then that means they're a cataloger. And if they're a cataloger, I'm the one deactivating their account. But so we want to make sure this is set at circulator. We're going to set the privilege expiration date to today. So I guess I can just do that. That'll be easier. And then I'm going to click the box for active. So now that this checkbox is unclicked. And that's really all I need to do to deactivate that account. Come up here and I'll say, oh,
Samantha.
Yes.
Just a reminder, because this is something we have to keep in mind because of the bug that's out there right now. So I have to deal with this a lot. That active checkbox is not visible if the show is set at suggested fields.
Oh,
so
okay.
You might want to give people a heads up to make sure you're on all fields.
Okay, I did not actually
I can't tell
that.
you how many times there's a bug right now where sometimes when a patron has expired and you're having to renew their account, that active box doesn't automatically get rechecked. And so I've been so many rounds with myself trying to remember, other staff trying to remember that active box only shows up under all fields. And sometimes the account will default to show suggested fields when you click the edit button.
Okay, I will I'll add that to the knowledge book and I'll definitely make sure to include that in any this in the future. Thank you.
Just something to be aware of.
Yeah, so I've switched it over to suggested fields and you can see it's no longer here. So that's good to know. So let me move it back to all fields and it's back and it's still unchecked. So we've saved it and now this account is essentially it's only going to come up if in doing a patron search, I click this include inactive button. And in that case, this will come up. But if I don't have this checked, then it does not come up. So Still findable, but you do have to make sure that you are including inactive in your search. All right, so the other part of deactivating accounts is reports. And this is not going to be the case every time a staff member leaves, obviously, but if you do have a staff member who runs reports that are utilized by the library as a whole, not just reports that they kind of like to use for their job, but major reports that you use. Before they leave, the best way to go is that before they leave to ask them to change the sharing settings on their templates and then clone those templates into a generic reports account. And we do recommend that you have a generic reports account. That way their staff turnover does not affect the reports. So if you don't have one and a staff member is leaving, that's a great time to create one. If for whatever reason you prefer not to have a generic reports account, then you're going to clone that over from the shared folder into whatever staff member's account that's going into. Then you'll set up the reports following the parameters in their versions. So you'll look at how they had their report set up off of that template, and you'll just set the same things. And that would also include recurrence. Is this going to recur? And if so, where is it going and how often is it going to recur? Now, if somebody leaves and that's when you realize that they had all these reports that you need, it is possible to basically get this yourself, but you'll just have to take a few extra steps. The first step is to reactivate their account. So you'll basically undo all the things that we just did in that deactivation process. You'll make sure that it's set with a password that you can remember, because then you will need to log out of your account and log into their account. Once you've done that, then you'll just follow these steps where you change the sharing permissions, you clone the templates, you set up the reports. It is a lot easier to do this before a staff member leaves, but I understand in the flurry of someone leaving, you don't always remember these things. And of course, sometimes somebody may leave suddenly. So it is definitely possible to have this done after the fact, but it is much easier to do it beforehand. So let's take a look briefly at how to do this, because I have tried to explain it in steps to people, and I think they leave more confused. It is much easier to show it. So I am going to go into the report section, and I'm going to come down to the shared folders and click on the arrow next to templates. And I'm going to find essentially the main folder that these folders would be in. So let's see. These aren't in alphabetical order, and it drives me crazy.
My
So this
least
is
favorite part of the reporter.
I know, mine too. And it's got a lot of competition. Let's come down here to Irene Patrick, to this iPatrick folder, because this is one folder that we had to do this process with quite a bit. So I'm going to open up, and I see that in her case, she already has things shared. Oh, you know what? Let me take a step back. You would log into the person's account or have them log in. Find their particular template that they would like. And basically, they're going to change the sharing settings for that folder. So they're going to come up here to manage folder. And then we're going to choose share this folder, and then choose the level at which they want to share it. So in in a case like this, you're probably just going to share it with your own library, not necessarily consortium wide. You might find that it's best to share it at the system level though. So let's just, in this case, I'm going to share it at NC Cardinal. That'll make it easier for me. But in most cases, you're probably going to share it with your system or specific branch and share the folder.
One little caveat here.
Yes.
If you are sharing a folder and it's within another folder, you can't share something within another folder that's Cardinal if the higher level folder is just your system. So, you don't want to have a Cardinal shared folder in a folder that's shared with like just Harnett County or something
Yes, that's a good point,
like that.
because
That will cause all kinds of
I think I definitely did that once where I shared a template that I'd created for somebody. And the subfolder I shared, but I didn't have the main folder shared and they couldn't find it. And it was really confusing. So that's a very good point. Okay, so you would basically, you'd want to share the folder and then log out of your account and log into their account, or I'm sorry, log out of their account and log into your account. Or in the case that they haven't left yet, then once they've done that, they'd let you know. You would log into the account where this report is going to live now, and you would find it in the shared folders section. So we're going to come down here to the templates and we're going to come back to iPatrick, and we're just going to open up this folder. And there we go. And then we're going to select the templates that we want to clone over into our account. So I'm going to select one, I'm going to clone it, and then I'm going to put it into this account. So currently it is still living in the iPatrick account, but is shared. So it's available for people outside that account to see. We're now going to clone it so that it actually, we have a copy of it living in our specific account. So you choose the folder it's going to live in, and then you would do everything you need to do to kind of create a template at this point. Now, I'm not actually going to clone this. So that's the first step of it. Does that make sense? I feel like it's still confusing even with the visuals. Does anybody have additional questions on that aspect of it? All right, so now you have the template. Now you have the template living in your account, but you still don't have any recurrence set up. So if this was sort of a report that was run occasionally, then you can just run it as you need it. If this is a report that recurs and is emailed to somebody, then you would definitely need to go ahead and set it up. So we would find that template and we would follow the general process of setting up a report. One thing that you can do that can be really helpful is you can go into the account that the template and used to live in, and you can find the way that they have set up their reports. And I'm not sure that I've got iPatrick here. All right, we're going to go with Jane Doe. Yeah, we'll go with Jane Doe. All right, so basically you can take a look at their reports, and you can, these view and edit buttons will allow you to actually see what they have done to set it up. So you can make sure that your parameters in the report you're setting up match the parameters in the original report. So that if they had it set up to run at a certain, during a certain date range or something like that, you can make sure that you're matching exactly. And then of course you'll want to set up the recurrence to run in whatever way that you need. This may be a time to explore whether or not that recurrence cycle is still effective for you. But if it is, then you'd want to match it. If it's not, then you'd want to set it up at the one that you've selected when you're setting up the new version of this report. And at that point, of course, you'll put in your email address or the email address of whoever will be receiving this information now. And hopefully everything goes as planned. And if it doesn't, submit a help ticket. We can figure out what's happening. All right, is that clear? And if it's not, this is something that I'm happy to go over with people in help tickets or to dig into a little bit more now. I know it's reports, everything with reports can be a little confusing. Okay. Well, so that is basically everything that I wanted to cover. Some of the key takeaways that I want to make sure, if you've forgotten everything else I talked about, you remember this. And that's that all catalogers and admins must have personal staff login accounts. If somebody is going to be a cataloger, but they haven't passed the assessments yet, make sure that you go ahead and set that account up for them at the circulator level first. That way, once they get those permissions, It's an easy process of just changing the permission level in the existing account rather than going in and creating an account from scratch at that point. Please make sure your staff know not to circulate items on those accounts. If they would like to circulate items, then they should have a patron account, and it could be set to staff, meaning that they will have whatever library policies are set for staff members versus regular patrons. They can have whatever special privileges are afforded to them, but they should not be circulating items on their staff login accounts. Don't forget working locations. I think if there's anything else, don't forget working locations, just because that's the thing I always forget. And I know the problems that it causes when you forget it. We didn't actually look at this as closely as I meant to, so we can look at that now. And that's staff resetting their passwords via the OPAC. And then of course, don't forget to deactivate accounts when staff leave. Let's look briefly at the OPAC thing. And I think the easiest way to do this is with an incognito window, but I don't know if that's going to share. Can everybody see my incognito window?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. So we're just going to go to the OPAC view. And I do the incognito because you have to log out of the staff browser or the staff client before you can log into the OPAC. And it's just faster for me to do this than to log out of that, log into here, log out of here, then log back into the staff client. And I'm rather lazy sometimes, so I do it this way. So I'm going to log in here. And from here, one key thing to note about the logging in process, this is something that I've discovered with a couple different people. Make sure that they know to use their username, the same username they use to log into the staff client, and not their library card number. I've had several people who, even though they know they're logging into their staff account via the OPAC, they're still putting in their barcode number from their patron account. And then they're like, I don't understand why it's not working. And it's, you know, I can see where that thought process is coming from. It's a mistake I would probably make as well. It's definitely happened to several people. So that if that's one thing to troubleshoot, if you find that people are having trouble with this part of it. Once you're inside the OPAC, then you are going to come up here to My Account. And then Account Preferences. Oh, no, this is. And then I'm sorry, this interface for some reason looks different than it did the last time I did this. And I'm probably just remembering wrong, but it threw me off for a second. So once you're in your personal information section, then you're going to come down to the password line and you're going to click change. You'll need to put in your current password and then reset your password and then put it in again to verify it and then click submit. And that's basically going to change the password in the staff client. And that is how they should be doing it every time they get that password update notification. I know there was a lot of confusion around that when we first rolled out this policy. I hope that for the most part, the general process has been well documented enough at this point that most people know this. But if you do have any staff members who are struggling with it, this is the general process. If you try to walk them through it and it's still not working, please feel free to submit a help ticket. You know, there's still some kinks in this system that we're working through. So, all right, that is, I think, officially everything that I have. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes. Are you scheduling meetings so that we can like go over our questions with like you actually looking at our users?
It depends. So I've had several where what happens is that somebody reaches out and says, this isn't working. I reach back out with sort of, you know, I check into their account, make sure that they're not expired or any of those other things that may cause something to not work. And I get back to them and say, this is this is your first step of troubleshooting. If that doesn't work, then yes, I've definitely scheduled meetings with people to figure out what's going on. That's how I discovered the barcode thing, is that I had several meetings with people where once we actually sat down to do it and to walk through the account, we discovered that that was where the problem was. So I'm always happy to schedule those meetings if the initial troubleshooting doesn't work. Anything else? Well, I really appreciate everybody's time today. I know that some aspects of being a SLAM are confusing in part because you only use them, once a year maybe. So, please feel free, even though this has happened, don't feel like you cannot reach out to me with questions. I'm always happy to answer any questions that you come across. And I will be posting this as well. So if you need to go back and refresh or share it with a new staff member or something like that, that will be available.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Samantha.
Thank you for being here.